Today we're going to add a bunch of cleaning up of our code and make a couple things that just make the game run a little nicer. I'm going to start by organizing all of these events. I'm going to first add a group, so I can right click at the bottom and do add group, or I can click add at the very bottom right and do add group. I'm going to name my group controls. And this part's optional, but I'm going to put that this is the section of the code that's going to handle my player object, the controls and input from the keyboard and mouse. And we want to make sure this is active on start. We're not going to activate and deactivate anything in this game, but that is a feature for more complex games. So we're going to hit OK, and I'm going to put this right underneath my start of layout. And then I'm going to add some of my things to this block so that I can make my code look neater. So I'm going to add the every tick to the controls. If I click on the event, it's not going to let me move it. So make sure you click on this little area, the handlebar, so that the whole thing lights up. Drag that into controls. See how it becomes indented? Then you know it's inside of it. So then if you open and close controls, you'll see it's inside there. Also want my left button clicked in there. And for those of you who do not like to use the arrows, we're going to go ahead and add in WASD control now. So I'm going to add an event to controls. It's going to be keyboard on key down. So while the key is down, I want the control to be happening. So instead of key pressed, we're going to do key is down. And the key I'm going to have is W. Hit OK. Hit done. And then we have a keyboard W is down event. Then the action for this is we're going to take the player and we want to simulate the 8 direction control. So under the 8 direction, you'll see you want to simulate control. We want to have the W work as the up control. So we'll hit done there. And then instead of making this a bunch of other times, I'm going to copy this, right click copy or control C, and then right click paste. This is the first time you'll need to allow this. I'm just going to change this to forever so I don't have to do it again. And then paste, paste, so that I have 4 of them. Once they're made, it's a lot easier to fast them. So once they're made, it's a lot easier to change them. So I'm going to double click the second one, click here, change that to A, next one to S, last one to D. And then A is going to be left, so double click, change it to left. S is down, and then D is going to be right. Then you can go ahead and test that and make sure that that's working. So now when I press WASD, my character moves in those directions instead of having to use the arrows. I'm going to go back and add in a pause in a minute. But I want to add something else before I do that, so we'll come to that in just a second. So I'm going to close controls and move to the next section. So now I'm going to add another group, so add group. I'm going to name this one monster. And for my description, I'm going to put controls a monster object. Again, this is optional, you don't have to do that. That just adds in this little text for your own notes. I'm going to drag that right underneath our controls. Then I'm going to add my 3 events in there. So my monster outside layout goes inside the monster group. My bullet collision with monster goes in there. And my creating new monsters. So my system every monster timer second event also goes in there. Now I'm going to make 2 changes every time my bullet hits a monster. The first is I want to show that that happens instead of just having them disappear. So I'm going to go back to layout 1. I'm going to double click at the top of my screen to create a new event. That's going to be a sprite. So type SPR, we'll see sprite. I'm going to name this explosion, and then hit insert. Then I'm going to click outside my window, and then I'm going to load my image. And choose this explosion image, hit open, and then close that. Now when I drag this on, you're going to see that there's a black border around it. So kind of chose this image on purpose to show that you can modify the blend properties. So with this selected, I'm going to scroll down until I find Effects, Blend Mode, and we're going to change this to Additive. Since black counts as a 0, it basically becomes transparent. So anything black will end up going away, and then you'll see that the image is actually partially transparent. So that looks a lot better than it did just a second ago. I'm going to move that back off the screen. Then when my explosion happens, I'm going to want it to fade away. So I'm going to add in a behavior. So add new behavior. And the one we're going to choose here is fade. So I'm going to add that. Fade behavior. And then here's the options I want. They're pretty much the default options. I don't want it to fade in, so I want it to start as a full image. I don't want it to wait for it to start fading, and fading out for about 1 second sounds pretty good. If you want to see a preview of that, just drag that down onto the screen, hit run, and you'll see it fade away. I'm going to keep that off the end, and since it gets destroyed as soon as the fade is over, you don't have to worry about putting any events in to destroy your explosion. Switching back over to our event sheet, we're going to add that explosion in when the bullet hits the monster here. So we're going to add a new action. We want the bullet to spawn another object, so type spawn another object. The bullet is going to spawn the explosion. We're going to do the bullet because it's small, and we want the explosion to show up where the bullet hits the monster. And since the bullet's so small, the image point doesn't really matter, so we'll just leave that to its default settings. And then I'm going to add that to the top before the bullet gets destroyed so that the bullet can create it in the correct location. So now when I run this, when a monster comes, I will be able to shoot them and see an explosion, and then have it fade away. Alright, close that. Then the last thing I want to do, at least for right now, is I'm going to add one more action, and I'm going to have this be a system action, and I want to modify my monster timer. So I'm going to do set value, and I want to set my monster timer to itself, monster timer times, so make sure you use the asterisk, and then I can do 0.99. So every time it's going to multiply itself by 0.9, so it's going to get a tiny bit smaller. So since we start at 5 and multiply by 0.99, it's going to get a little bit smaller. So let's build the calculator to see what that'll look like. So if I start with 5 and I kill the first monster, so times 0.99. The next time, monsters are going to take 4.95 seconds to spawn, and then 4.9, then 4.85, then 4.8, and then every time you kill another monster, it's going to become faster and faster, so eventually the monsters come in 4 seconds, 3 seconds, and remember it's 4 monsters at a time, so really it's, you know, like 4 clicks every time that it's going to go down, so you're going to see that the monsters start coming faster and faster. And if you live long enough, they're going to start to come every 2 seconds, every 1 second, every half second. And then eventually there will be too many monsters and the game will end. So we'll click done there, have that added to our code. Now the monster section looks good, so I'm going to close that. Now that I've added my explosion, I can add in the pause that I wanted to add. So I'm going to go back to controls. Then I'm going to want to add an event to controls, and that is going to be a keyboard event, and that is going to be a pressed. So on key pressed, hit next, and then the key I want is probably going to be P or pause. I'm actually going to do both. So I'm going to hit P on my keyboard, hit OK, and then hit done. Then I can't add another pressed event because you can't press two keyboards at the exact same instance. It won't see those as the same event. So I'm going to have to right click on this, and I'm going to have to right click on this, and you'll see that it's actually not here. So you actually have to click on the handlebar on the left side, right click, and make this an OR block. Then I can right click and I can add another condition. It's going to be the same thing. So keyboard on key press. This time I'm going to press the pause key. That is above the arrow. So if you look on your keyboard and you see your arrows, just above page up and page down is the pause key. So I'll hit OK, hit done, and then it'll say keyboard event. Whenever I press P or the pause key, then this is going to happen. So now the code for pausing it is I'm going to set the time scale. So I'm going to add action system, and I'll just type time scale. So set time scale, hit next. And I want the global time scale, not a particular object's time scale. So hit next. And then here are the settings. So 1.0 is normal speed of the game. 0.5 is half, 2 is double, 0 is pause. So what we want to do is we want to change it to pause. But instead of setting it to 0, I'm going to set it to where every time I press the button, it flips back and forth between 1 and 0. So I'm going to do that by doing 1.0 minus the current time scale. So when it's currently 1, 1 minus 1 becomes 0, and then it's paused. When it's paused, 1 minus 0 is 1. That will restore it to normal speed. So hit done, and then that will allow us to pause and unpause the game with that one button. So I'm going to hit preview to play that. When the monsters come, I'll hit P, and then it pauses. You can still move the player, but he doesn't actually move in the game, but you can rotate. So we'll fix that in a little bit. And then I'll just press the pause key to unpause it, and then here they come. When you press it, you'll see everything pauses. So I'm going to close that, and then to fix some of our graphics issues, I'm going to make some things invisible. So I'm going to add an action. I'm going to go to the player, and I want to toggle. I want to set visibility. So set visible. And then I want to toggle it, and then hit done. And then it might be faster to copy and paste that. So I'm going to double click, hit back, change it to the monster, hit next, done. And then it changes it to the next object. So my player became visible, my monster, I'm going to copy and paste that for the bullet and the explosion. So change the monster to the bullet, next, done. Change this one to the explosion, next, done. Then I'm going to go back to layout 1, and I'm going to actually reuse this same text box that is called text from my game over. So I'm going to call that game over pause text. So I'm going to reuse it so I don't have a whole bunch of objects over here. And then on layout 1, I'm going to drag that game over pause text over, kind of center that on my viewport. If you put your X at 0, our size is already 854, so then it would fit exact. I'm just going to go to the text and change that to pause. And then the important thing, so that this doesn't show up on my screen, is I go down to the bottom, and where it says initially visible, I'm going to turn that off so that when I run the game, it's not there. Also make sure that this is on the layer GUI so that it follows wherever you end up being on the screen when you pause it. Then when we go back to event sheet, I'm going to copy and paste toggle visibility again. This time I'm going to do my game over pause text. So now when I run that and I pause it, the player and everything else goes away, but my pause shows up. And then when I unpause it, that goes away. Let's wait for some monsters. We'll like put some stuff on the screen and pause it then. Last thing we'll see is that we can create bullets while the game is paused, so we need to disable that too. So we'll close that. The way we'll do that is on our mouse left button clicked, we're just going to add another condition, system, and we're going to compare a value. The first value is going to be time scale. We want to make sure that it is greater than 0. So basically if the game is not paused, then you can shoot a bullet. So now if I run it and I pause the game and I try and shoot, no bullets get created as a way to cheese the game. Then I'll collapse my controls section again, and I'm going to add one more group, and that is going to be the lives group. We're going to have that control the player lives and game over. So we'll hit OK for that. I'm going to put that right underneath monster, and then I'm going to add my player collision with monster and my system lives less than 0 event. And then so that each life you get a new attempt, I'm going to add one last action, system, and that's going to be a set value for my global variable, monster timer. We're going to reset that to 5 each time you die so that you don't have a wave of monsters come right at you when you spawn if you've gotten pretty far. That way each time you can kind of build back up. Then we can close that section, and we are finished with this one. We only have one more section where we add a power up for our player, and then our game will be complete.